You kind of thinking, why do you need for it? What on earth do you want $450 million for? If you had $350 million, when you get home and your wife goes, well, we can't live on this. I was going to buy the kids the pyramids. They'll have to make it with the Taj Mahal. These sons are extraordinary, and they're not only extraordinary, but the comments they make about them are extraordinary. Bob Diamond, some people might know the name. He was head of Barclays. And these people, even after the crisis, this is different, in fact, from the great crashes of before, where at least the people who caused it didn't sort of personally suffer to some degree. Now they don't. Bob Diamond took £6 million bonus the year after the crash as head of Barclays, and he said last year, when he was questioned about the bonuses that he was continuing to get, surely now the period for remorse and apology for bankers must be over. And you can feel for him, because when you think about bankers, these are the words that just trip off the tongue. Remorse and apology. You don't have to keep apologising, you bankers, you poor suffering bankers. Apologise, apologise, apologise. At least have a little bit of self-esteem, you can't help thinking. Digby Jones, who was the head of the CBI, as it was called, he said that the year that the bankers' bonuses went down slightly, this was his exact words, they received not one jot of praise. For things we don't praise them when they do good things, like when it's like saying the great train robbers. I mean, we all moan about the year they did rob a train, but for the years that they didn't rob a train, they received a jot of praise. And so on and so on. This thieving goes on. The bedroom tax, as people, you almost have to start over again every time you think about it. The bedroom tax, because the poor have got the people who have robbed us and the people who are on benefits who have one empty room somewhere. And if you even suggest, as it was suggested, that there should be a mansion tax for people with property worth £2 million or more, George Osborne, the Chancellor, replied that we couldn't possibly bring that in because it would be extraordinarily complicated to calculate, he said. To calculate which properties were worth more than £2 million. We'd have to go around to every house in Britain, every property. I'm sure all of you here, a man would have to come round with a clipboard, look at your house, and it might be worth £2 million, we better check. Maybe Picasso painted the kitchen. The thieving is so relentless. But, and that's why it was brilliant. It was brilliant that it started with Paulette tonight, because it isn't just. If you can feel as if it's just such a relentless series of unjustified, filthy attacks, and yet it is more than that comprises Britain today. It is also that there are people resisting and complaining about it, and even when it doesn't feel like you're winning, you're doing more than if you didn't resist at all. That, I think, is evident. Vicky at a swimming pool. I'm sure it must be extraordinarily annoying that they've managed to shut a swimming pool when there clearly is the money to do it, if they took it from the right places. But next time that council goes to shut something, they'll think, oh, look at the fuss we had with the swimming pool, they all went mad. There's no telling that. The one thing that you can be certain, even if you fight and lose, you resist and you do much more than if you didn't fight at all. And that's true, I think. We've had a few victories, just the fact that it's called the bedroom tax. They hate it. That's what everybody knows it as now. Just as 20 years ago people knew about the poll tax, and Thatcher would go mad about calling it the community charge and so on. It's known now as a rotten, filthy tax that is an attack on poor people by so many people. The fact that there is still a health service, however battered it is, however much the private finance people want to use it as another institution to make themselves rich, there is still a health service. It is still there, however wounded it is. And it's there despite the fact that there's been these people that for 30 years pretty relentlessly have wanted to turn it into something that exists just so that businessmen can make even more profit. All of these things are still there. Even, I think, when you think of the reaction to the departure of the dear Baroness a few weeks ago, the reaction changed as far as I could tell, because the media, I thought, for the first few hours, they seemed to believe, to me, that there was going to be a consensus that, well, even if you didn't like what she did, we have to respect that she was a very strong woman, she was a conviction politician and so on, and of course, I think they misunderstood why so many people despised her, really. It wasn't that they disagreed with her, it's that she ruined their lives, which is if a robber comes in your house and ties you up to a chair and takes all your stuff, you don't say later, well, I disagree with many policies. But he was certainly a conviction robber. And so, it changed. It changed so quickly, I think. In the space of within a day or so, there seems to be a different reaction, and it was reflected in the media. No, we have to accept that there are people who really, really hated her, and they're not going to go along with it. I've seen in many areas, I think the people I felt sorry for the day she died actually were the Jehovah's Witnesses in many areas, because it was very confusing for them. They were knocking on doors saying, have you heard the good news? And people it changed the way that the establishment had to present ideas. It changed. It happened over the bedroom tax. It's happened in so many ways. It's so brilliant to hear stories already tonight about how people have fought in different ways. Especially, Joanne, I hope you got your breakfast that morning off your mum and she didn't rob you of that. And that's why the People's Assembly, I think, is cut. It doesn't mean, before the People's Assembly, it didn't mean there were no battles, no strikes, no struggles, no people fighting back against all this injustice and inequality. There was a great deal of it, and many of it's been mentioned tonight. But if there is something that is national, that is a campaign that can link these things together, that can provide a network, that can make people feel that they're not just on their own, that when people are fighting back, they're part of something that they can go to, that they can help to, that help to spread the campaign, that can say, look, all right, if your hospital's under attack, then we can put you in touch with the people in Lewisham, in North London, in Stafford and so on. This is an enormous step forward as far as I can see. That these campaigns that can be coordinated. And the brilliant thing about the People's Assembly, I think, is it is uniting. It is starting to unite. Many hundreds, well, thousands of people already, I think we can say, from the meetings I myself and lots of other people have done. Bigger meetings, more people interested in this particular campaign, I think, or this sort of network of people that we're trying to build against the government's austerity. More than anything else than has happened in recent years. And I think that's tremendously encouraging. I think it's encouraging because we are trying to get across the idea, I don't mean us, I mean all of you, are getting across the idea that the brilliant thing, you can be in any party or in no party, it doesn't really matter. There's a brilliant sense of camaraderie from people saying, you know, of course we're going to disagree, but that doesn't matter on the main issues. We're going to stick together. It's going to be a different sort of campaign. I know many people have been in left-wing groups in recent years that probably, if we're being brutally honest, haven't gone quite as well as they might have hoped. and have fallen apart for a magnificent string of exotic reasons. And so now there is an attempt, I think, by people who want to overcome all of that, to get together to say that if we all stand up and fight together, as people have said, that we can. We're already changing the way that this country is run. I'll just finish with a couple of examples of that. You know, it's often said that if you're going to have any chance of any success politically in this country, then you've got to capture the centre ground. And in many ways that may or may not be true, whatever that means. What that forgets, though, is that the centre ground shifts. And it shifts because it can be shifted. If you just think of the argument last week over gay marriage. 20 years ago, if you supported the idea of gay marriage, you were an extremist. Now, if you oppose it, you're an extremist. That hasn't happened magically. It's happened because millions of people around the world have stood up and fought and argued, and sometimes very courageously in very difficult situations, and they have shifted the debate, and they have made it that you are the peculiar one now if you are opposed to something that is so obviously just and right. The centre ground has shifted. One of the brilliant things about being in this room, that marvellous woman on the bottom there, Harriet Tubman, she was a slave in southern states of America in the 1850s. and she fled a plantation, and she set up something called the Underground Railroad, which was an organisation that assisted slaves who were fleeing the plantations, and she got them up to safe houses and so on, extraordinary, courageous people, and they were all sort of spirited away to Canada. And what must it have seemed like at that time? I mean, I can't imagine, but I would take a guess that it must have seemed probably more difficult for her at that time than it does for us fighting the bedroom tax. And yet such was the extraordinary heroism and the arguments and the way that people put forward their ideas and so on, attracted as many people as possible, that they made it seem the most normal thing possible. Now, I think it's fair to say the centre ground has shifted on the issue of slavery over the last 60 years. Now, if you're for it, you're probably even Nigel Farage will tell you. Maybe not. In a plantation, when prospects must have seemed pretty tough, in the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln made her in effect a commander in the forces for the Northern Army. A most extraordinary sort of story of people fighting over ideas that must have seemed so hopeless and making them seem mainstream. And that, I think, is going to happen here. It's only going to happen if we all do the difficult bit after tonight and the meetings and so on and the great atmosphere and that everyone goes away from here and does something. It doesn't have to be tons of things. If everyone does something, when they're cross, instead of screaming at the television, write a letter to the local paper, do something, a petition, an online petition, a leaflet, something in the window. If we get a network of people around the country, thousands, there's already thousands, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, doing those things, simple things, of putting ourselves about, getting together, overcoming the little disagreements we have to fight over the huge issues, then we can shift the centre ground. We can make it seem what is so evident to anyone who looks at this honestly and justly, that the idea that the poor have to pay for the crisis that the rich have created is so abhorrent, so rancid and filthy, that one day it will seem as prehistoric, ridiculous and absurd as all these other ideas that have washed away over the last 100 years.